Hello everyone, my name is Jingshu Zhao. I'm a PhD student in politics at the University of Exeter and also a research assistant of the Entanglement of Political Language project and the Citizen Empowerment project. Today we are here to have an interview with Dr. Emilie Frenkiel. Hi Emily.
Hello everyone. I'm a political scientist based in France, in the University of Paris East, in a new school of political studies based in Fontainebleau, starting this month. I'm also the director of a research lab named LIPHA and the co-director of a new center of research action called ALGOPO. And my main research field is Chinese contemporary politics.
Thank you, Emily. It's great to have you with us today. I'm also together with Dario.
Hi, my name is Dario Castiglione. I'm the director of the Center for Political Thought at the University of Exeter. And I would like to start the interview by asking Emily. Emily, you've started working on Chinese issues with the book Conditional Democracy, published also in English with this title, which was more about the political reform and how a certain generation of academics, particularly in the humanities and social sciences in Chinese universities, saw it. But then you moved more to the issue of deliberative and participatory kind of institutions at a more local level. So what did make you change, or what did you take it to this new topic? And were there any particular challenge also methodologically and to do the kind of research?
Thank you, Dario, for this great question. What happened was during the thesis, in a way, I was using the thesis as a way of learning more about how people engaged in political thinking were conceiving politics, what was a good government for them, what was their view of the best system for China. And it was, I used this curiosity that I had to learn more about the country and the way people were studying politics and talking about politics, especially in universities. But once I had sort of an overview of that issue, then there were many things that I wanted to discover. And especially the thing that I found the most interesting and my new curiosity was how come in some places there were some local practices of deliberation and participation in a system that seemed so different from the one where these practices were currently practiced. Obviously, this came from Brazil, and even though Brazil is very different from Western Europe or North America, Brazil is also very different from China. And so my thesis actually brought me to the study of this peculiarity of the thriving, even though it's still, and at the time it was exceptional, and it is still exceptional in China, but the thriving of full-fledged participatory and deliberative practices at the local level. And it was also an instrumental research in my quest for understanding this country and its political system and its society, because I was moving from focusing on the elites and intellectual discourse onto local practices, local governments, how ordinary citizens were thinking and how they were interacting with local leaders. And so, yeah, the second part of your question was the methodology, right? What is it like to conduct fieldwork in localities? So obviously, it's very different. During the thesis, it was easy. I was interviewing university professors. The access was fairly easy. We were speaking the same language in a sense, even though obviously, the same academic language, even though I had to learn Mandarin in the process. But then in the access to the local, to these local practices is harder. And also I've been investigating China at a different time. Conducting fieldwork in the Hu Jintao era is very different from conducting fieldwork in the current era, especially for a foreign researcher. So this is much harder, also this curiosity and genuine will to just understand what is going on, and just to observe might be less easily understood by local leaders who are very busy and have so much to take into account, including the political risk of allowing a foreign observer to observe and write and talk about what they're doing. Access and conducting local fieldwork in China hasn't been easy, and there have been ups and downs, and also there are great variations depending on where you are at what time, and who you're working with, who is recommending you as a serious scholar, and so on.
The research on the Chinese debate about political reform and practice of participation and representation involves comparing different cultures, ideas, and experiences. What do you find interesting in these comparisons? Moreover, given that some Chinese scholars think there are some similarities between China and France, did you find that this helped you in understanding the Chinese experience?
Thank you, Bingshu. So I'm engaging in comparison, in the sense that, I'm not really in comparative politics, but obviously not having been born and raised in the Chinese mainland, I have an outsider's look. And what's been interesting to me, and in that sense, Tocqueville's view of comparison as a way of seeing with fresh eyes your own country and the society that you know best, it really resonates for me. So when I'm investigating what's going on in China, obviously I have in mind what is going on in France and how French society works, French politics, and also what is going on in terms of citizen participation and deliberation in the French context, for instance. And so what happens is that when I focus on China, the difference in the system usually actually makes some things more visible. And it's not, most of the time, it's not that I discover completely different things and that the France and China are two very different and opposite worlds. It's more that actually through studying China, some things just, how can I say, just are highlighted, and that I don't pay as much attention to them when I see them happening in the French context. But in China, there's sort of, it just becomes obvious that, you know, some phenomena are taking place. And instead of, and my take is that instead of identifying them as Chinese peculiarity, I always wonder, well, is it only happening in China, or is it because China is so different that now I see them? And so I go back to the French experience, or what I can observe, or what my colleagues who are specialists of French politics observe. And then actually what's interesting is that I realized that they do exist as well, but because they're just all around us. And there are other things to analyze and that are more visible, then we don't pay as much attention. So going to China allows me to understand what is going on there, but it's also a detour to see with a different lens what is going on in France. Now, it's interesting that Chinese scholars think that there are great, you know, there are similarities between France and China. I think it's a very complex issue. I think that there are differences and similarities between China and any country in the world. And I don't see, it doesn't seem so obvious to me that there's a particular closeness to China and France.
Now, going back to your research on the forms of participation and deliberation in Chinese politics, what do you find most distinctive in them? Is there any particular lesson that you think is important to draw from them?
So in a way, I'm going to maybe repeat what I was just saying. What is most distinctive is that some features are more extreme in China. So it's not that the practice of local, you know, the devices in sort of, you know, citizen participation and deliberation practices in China are wholly different. But what is distinctive is that things that can be observed elsewhere, these features can be even more salient, I'd say, in the Chinese case. And the main reason for that, obviously, is because their citizen participation and deliberation is not complementary to election. It's actually put forward as replacing them, as maybe a better alternative in a sense. And so the main things that I observe, and I think it's not very original in the sense that it's not only happening in China, is that there's a great difference in practices depending on the willingness of political leaders to truly listen what ordinary citizens have to say, and also their willingness to share some of their power and well, especially this, you know, the decisionary power and budgetary power, for instance, with these ordinary citizens. There's great importance of the design. So how these leaders design the devices along with scholars or professionals of citizen participation and deliberation. And what is also quite salient is that all of these devices can be counterproductive if they promote the fact that they are empowering ordinary citizens, while in the end, no one listens to what these ordinary citizens said and the whole process is non-binding, and their voice is actually ignored if it does not correspond to what political leaders had in mind. So this is happening in China. This is the really salient, but this is also happening elsewhere. What is very, very distinctive, however, is that because there are no elections, and because the decision-making process is usually at local level very much dependent on one leader, Ibasho, right? One person who has all of the decisionary power, then what is happening through the process of organizing citizen participation or deliberation is that it's not just making the whole process more transparent and more inclusive, especially to the ordinary citizens. It's changing many things in the intermediary in the process, and it means that well, actually, it's empowering more people, maybe more elites, to take part in the decision-making process. That is pretty distinctive of the Chinese practice of citizen participation and deliberation, to my mind.
Thank you, Emilie. Can I in some way ask you to say something a bit more about the last point? Because in some of your recent work, you have highlighted the fact that there is a kind of empowerment of more local or more differentiated elite. So in some way, these forms of deliberation and participation becomes a channel for a bit more pluralism of elite, not simply channeled through probably the party or the formal state. And therefore, can you say something a bit more about that? But also, in some way, in line with what you were saying before, that by looking at China, sometimes one rethinks about one's own country. But isn't there kind of differentiation of elite also a process that happens in the West through mobilization, participation, even social movement or civil society? So in some way, aren't we sometimes seeing similar things, that elites are also empowered as a result of forms of participation and deliberation?
Thank you, Dario. It's very true. Maybe I have to get into more details to make it clearer. For instance, if we focus on the pioneers of participatory budgeting and deliberative polling and sortition in China, which is Wenling and especially two townships, Zheguo and Qinhe. What happens there is that what the local device, which is called Kantanhui, honest talk, which is it's participatory budgeting, and it's implemented in very different ways in the two townships. What is happening there is that it is empowering ordinary citizens if they want to get involved. In Xinhe, for instance, there's no sortition there. But what is truly happening is that instead of having very centralized budgetary decisions, the local assembly, so the local representatives who before the process actually really did not have budgetary power and did not have access to the full budget, now do. And I think that this is quite peculiar in the sense, that kind of elites. The fact that they are so marginalized from the decisionary the decision-making process is still quite peculiar to China, even though obviously the fact that other elites and other actors benefit from the inclusion of more inclusion in the decision-making process is a sort of a common phenomenon. Another thing that is quite peculiar to my mind is I've observed participatory budgeting in Chengdu in Sichuan also for several years, and it is happening especially at the village level. That's where I investigated it. And what was interesting is that at the village level, it was not only that it was more people were taking part in the process, is that the way but participatory budgeting is created actually goes along with the formation of a special group of villagers who are elected for 3 years to deal with the budget and the projects and make many of the important decisions for the village. And so here we have the constitution of a new layer of elites in the village. So it's not that there were already, how can I say, it's creating a sort of layer of super representatives of ordinary citizens and villages. And I think it is also a bit peculiar.
Well, that sounds very fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us, Emilie, and thank you for this stimulating conversation. We wish you all the best in your future research.
Thank you.